So it's Earth Day, and we are here with Anders Schulze, who's our new Chief Operating Officer at ZeroNorth. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Laura. It's great to be here.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Anders and his experience. Actually, he comes to us from Flexport, so we'll talk a little bit more about what that is and what learnings he's had that around customer centricity, around the digital transformation, because I believe some of the things that you have learned over there would be helpful to not only ZeroNorth, but also to our audience today. How do we embrace the green and digital transformation that's necessary for us to reach zero emissions? So let's start off the interview with talking a little bit about what are some of the biggest challenges that you think that the industry is facing today?
Great question. A lot of challenges, but let's zoom in on the three primary challenges as I see them. I think the first one is regulatory alignment, essentially getting to the right sort of ambitious targets and then holding the right players and the ecosystem accountable for actually getting there. Then I think secondly, it's all about the technology adoption. One thing is developing new innovative technologies themselves. Another thing is actually driving adoptions. I think there's a lot of exciting technologies out there, but how do we ensure that we actually adopt all the good stuff that's out there so that we essentially get the scale benefits that are absolutely necessary getting towards zero? Then I think thirdly, it's all about lowering the cost of this transition towards getting to zero. It can be a huge financial burden to undertake, new technologies, new fuel models and whatnot. But how do you get the fastest possible return on investment so you can fast track the journey towards getting to zero?
Yeah, super. Okay, so can we unpack those a little bit?
Yeah.
Maybe delve into the second one, which is adoption.
Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges that customers have in adopting these new technologies, and how can, maybe you can give some tips on how they can adopt them faster?
Yeah. I think it's all about, first and foremost, enabling your customers. For example, at Flexport, we had a lot of offerings, a lot of products in our platform, but it was all about ensuring that, our clients knew exactly what can I use which product for, and how am I being handheld to actually drive my own adoption and the adoption of my colleagues and even my customers as well. And there's more to it than just, a good UI there. It's all about making sure that you are being enabled to understand, hey, what's the return on investment if I have to, key in this field, or if I have to spend time on this, and actually seeing the tangible results of using that technology. And that comes with, great UI, good visuals, but also good reporting. So you can see, okay, is it actually reducing my cost? Is it actually reducing my carbon footprint, for example? And many other areas. Yeah.
Maybe we can take a step back and you can explain what Flexport does, just so people are aware.
Yeah, sure. Flexport is essentially a digital freight forwarder. A freight forwarder is essentially an actor that helps companies move the goods from A to B. It could be from Shanghai to Rotterdam, for example. It could be via a ship, via a plane, via not a truck in this case. But a freight forwarder is one that essentially help the customer, the cargo owner, to move the good from A to B. Also clearing the customs and so on and so forth. So Flexport was essentially disrupting the space of freight forwarding. There's a lot of players offering freight forwarding services globally. Many of them have existed prior and were born prior to the internet. Flexport was born on digital steroids, so to speak, in the cloud. And what we did at Flexport was to offer the same freight forwarding services as many of the established players, but via a digital platform. So clients in many cases could find the information they needed. It was already available in the platform, supported by customer service, so that you got the best of the technology bundled with human expertise. So in simple terms, just to dumb it down a touch, Flexport is in many ways the Uber of global freight. it's as easy in some ways to book a taxi with an Uber.
Okay, right. Okay, so for me, just having been in this industry for a while now, it seems if we talk about the human, two human sides, right? Human expertise that's helping along in conjunction with the technology, like how important is that? But also the humans that are utilizing the technology, and how do you get them to trust technology? So maybe we can take the trust part first.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's normal in human nature to have your sort of your biases from the past, and essentially your ways of working. So if you're not used to that technology, if you're not used to that user interface, it can be hard to adopt that new technology, right? And that typically comes with some hand-holding. Sometimes it's not as easy as, opening your news feed on Facebook or subscribing to Netflix, especially when it comes to B2B software as a service. So in many cases, there are also very specific user requirements from the one client to the other. And I think as a software provider, be it Flexport, ZeroNorth, or any other software provider, you got to be agile. You got to adjust to the client needs with human expertise instead of just saying, this software is meant for everyone, and we're not going to adjust it, because it doesn't work like that. You got to be agile, and you got to tailor make it client for client to make sure that you also get the client's data input, so you can return it with the right insights for the clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've understood is also at ZeroNorth is that the customers really. Maritime and global trade is a super complex industry. And I think that's probably why it hasn't been disrupted as much, because you really need deep industry knowledge in order to understand how you can disrupt it or how you can innovate within it. There's also, the importance of, when you understand about innovation, you don't want to say what you've been doing is bad. This is an improved way of doing, and getting that trust from people is critical. So can you talk about the marriage of, human expertise with technology, and how that's kind of a critical driver within, the maritime or global trade sector?
Definitely. I think you're spot on. We've seen the past handful of years more black swan events in the world of logistics than we've seen for decades, right? We had the COVID economy, and we've had the Ever Given vessel that got stuck in the Suez Canal. We have recently had the Red Sea situation, and the list goes on. Then we had the incident in Baltimore lately. And I think you cannot just plug and play historical data into your models, because many of these events have never been seen before. So you got to make sure that you have a super resilient, supply chain and modeling to essentially ensure that you can, in a very agile manner, fast track resolution around some of these incidents. It's not just plug and play from the past with a predictive model based on past events, because if these events have never really happened in the past, how on earth can you just use historical data? So you got to make sure that essentially you have a resilient model where you are able to adjust to these black swan events, which seem to continue. Otherwise, you won't succeed.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we can relate it to that. Not only are there black swan events, but there's also regulations that keep coming in, and they keep changing, right? So, of course, we need to get to zero emissions. And how do we do that? There's short-term, medium, and long-term things. We have the transition of the fuels. We have the improvements on vessels, but we also have the immediate things we can do in operational efficiencies and things like that. So you've talked about how technology needs to adjust. So maybe we can unpack a little bit around the regulations and how that affects our customers, and how can we make sure that technology helps them? Yeah,
I think first and foremost, it's a good thing that regulation is tightening, so that first and foremost we get essentially steeper targets for what must be done to get to zero, because that's the starting point. If you don't have bold ambitions, you won't get there. So that's where it starts. Then secondary comes very clear essentially reporting around, okay, what is it I'm trying to achieve, and how am I progressing towards that target. And I think it's all about enabling customers, enabling users with that transparency, because otherwise you're simply flying blind. I mean, a lot of these new initiatives and a lot of this new regulation, it's hairy stuff. I mean, it can be overwhelming, even if you know that's what you do for a living. It's a lot, and if you're just concurring and saying, hey, I mean, hands down, I'm not gonna essentially survive this, then you obviously won't survive. As opposed to say, hey, I want to survive this. I want to understand exactly how it works. And then I want to set up, the right metrics and the right, teams and the right tools to essentially get there. And I think technology is such an important element here, because otherwise you will just die in stale reports that won't get you there.
Yeah. And I think that's also what we're seeing is it's not just, regulatory department that has to handle this. This is actually the strategic direction of a company needs to make decisions based upon regulations that are coming in. And you need to decide, up front, which vessel to choose, which route to take, what's your CII rating, what's your financial implication for the tax if you come into the European Union today with the EU ETS. So with all of that coming in, technology is critical because there's so much data that you really need, technology to help you make decisions.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And then, it's our perspective at ZeroNorth as well. Yeah. And if we're looking at ZeroNorth, I'd be curious to ask you a little bit about why you decided to join ZeroNorth.
Yeah, just real quick, Lora.
Yeah.
I think to your point about essentially how to work with regulation, I think what we did both at Flexport and what I know ZeroNorth is doing is instead of just saying, okay, this is sort of the necessary evil, then saying, hey, this is the necessary good. I need to collaborate with these regulation institutions so that you can essentially also help influence the agenda and provide them with data and insight so they can also continue to up their game. I think that's where you join forces to essentially fast track that journey towards zero.
Yeah, and at ZeroNorth, we do believe that stronger regulations will help the industry to reach its zero emissions target. So thank you for pointing that out.
Indeed.
And I'm so glad to welcome you here to ZeroNorth and, want to know why you joined us here.
Yeah, very glad to be here. As I was telling Lora the other day, I've been lurking at ZeroNorth on the sideline for a few years by now. I'm very, very intrigued by the mission to make global trade green. I come from Flexport that pride itself on making global trade easy for everyone. So this was a plug and play in terms of taking the next step in my logistics career. I'm very, very fascinated with what ZeroNorth have achieved up until now with only four years behind you. So actually I started my career in Maersk tankers as a vessel operator. And at the time I was very puzzled with how hairy, cumbersome, and difficult it really was to just, navigate your voyage or your sailing information. I was always puzzled how little sort of data insights and visibility I had to essentially optimize my operations, be it, reducing fuel consumptions, emissions, but also taking, the best possible routing choices. So when I saw ZeroNorth popping up on my radar, I was like, oh, that's a big gap. That's a burning need. And I can't believe that someone has not developed this faster, because when I worked as an operator in Maersk tankers, that was 15 years ago. So it's about time that someone is really taking this to the next level. And I think ZeroNorth has done exactly that the past 4 years. So very excited about it.
Yeah, super. So what do you see is our potential and our role in the, green transition here?
Yeah, I think ZeroNorth has a massive responsibility and opportunity to essentially enable all the players in the ecosystem, be it ship owners, vessel operators, technical operators, cargo owners, and then also buyers and suppliers of fuel or bunker, to essentially get better insights on exactly how much is my vessel emitting, how much fuel is it burning. It may be a cheap price or a cheap, lease price, but is it actually also performing, to the standards that I'm subscribing to, both in terms of fuel cost, but also emissions. So I think ZeroNorth is an incredible enabler for those players I just mentioned in the ecosystem, to essentially enable them with insights to do better for their bottom line, reducing cost, and at the same time, most importantly, doing better for the planet.
Right. So that's, why we are here today is how do we improve the industry? How do we navigate towards zero? And if we're talking about Earth Day, like what are some key components that you think innovation plays in, companies' transitions, in technology that's driving things forward towards zero emissions?
Yeah, I think you can do a lot of things, all depending on your company and what you offer customers. If we zoom in on shipping owners, for example, I think we're seeing a lot of good momentum out there, where a lot of owners are starting to order green fueled ships, such as methanol ships, that will take the carbon footprint down significantly from the more legacy solutions you see. Then I think when it comes to just optimizing also your equipment on board existing legacy fleet, and then of course deploying software solution to get better insights so that you can take down emission before you even go to greener fuel. And I think we're seeing in some cases with ZeroNorth customers that we have helped them actually reduce their carbon footprint all the way down to 15% from better insights on exactly which route to take and how to bunker and whatnot.
Yep. Maybe we can go a little bit into, your experience at startups and creating an innovative culture.
Yeah.
Excuse me. How do you foster innovation in a company? Because it kind of takes a change mindset. And I feel like today we're asking our customers to trust technology, to actually take this, mindset shift. And so there's kind of two components, not only from a ZeroNorth point of view, but our customers' point of view. How do you embrace innovation?
Yeah, I think to me, it's all about, first and foremost, not accepting status quo.
Right.
A maniacal, bias to action. And then just thinking big, setting the bar incredibly high. I think at Flexport, we, in many ways, built the aircraft as we continued the journey, and we never stopped and said, "Hey, what we're doing for customers is the best out there." We continue to sort of innovate, set the bar higher, and say, "Okay, what can we learn from our clients, from competition? Yeah, we may have developed something great, but how can we make it even better?"
Yeah, but
that takes constant feedback loop instead of just resting on your laurels.
Yeah, I think I'm going to challenge you a little bit here.
Yeah, please.
In so much as when we look at the industry,
yeah.
The board and the executives in a company
yeah.
have strategic goals
yeah.
for commercial and environmental, right? And so they're going to set the direction of the company. But then you look at the heads of operations who actually want their fleet to all be sailing, optimally. They want all of their operators. I mean, some of these companies have 100 operators. They want them to be making the same type of decisions on the same type of data.
Yeah.
And then you have also the masters that are sailing on the sea.
Yeah.
So how do we bring this down? And you being someone who's going to head up, our operations area with all of our customers, we really need to make it tangible for the people who are sailing and the people who are helping them, giving them notice of how to sail.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that innovation and that mindset, to the front line?
Yeah. Great question. I think it starts with essentially a single source of truth where you have more transparency about essentially the information out there. I think shipping in the world of logistics is still in many ways somewhat antiquated. I think what we saw with many of our clients in Flexport was that they still used a lot of, spreadsheets, even fax machines, and emails, instead of just empowering them with having the exact same information in the same app, in the same platform. So, for example, if you work in accounting, you have, full landed cost visibility, similar to your colleague in the operations department. And that was unheard of in our space. And I think ZeroNorth is doing the same here, where, to your point, the master and the head of operation at a shipping owner actually have access to the same information in the same platform, where they can interact around it, as opposed to having to schedule a meeting or send an email or share a debt spreadsheet or PDF, because they have it readily available in the platform and can interact around same together with the ZeroNorth colleagues.
Yeah, so you're talking about having shared data across,
Yeah.
so breaking down silos, but there's also a human element.
Yeah.
I mean, ZeroNorth has a vast customer, team with different departments, even the, do it for you kind of team.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and how we can help customers wherever they are in their journey and whatever kind of needs they need?
Yeah.
Because maybe that's also, what our audience wants to know.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. What I've actually been super impressed with here at ZeroNorth is to observe how many industry veterans we have, individuals that have worked as engineers on the vessels themselves, all the way up to master and whatnot. So they definitely know what they're talking about. It's not just, getting a dashboard with a lot of numbers and a fancy UI. It's actually human expertise behind the scenes that can essentially work with clients, coaching them around the tool with better insights, with truly, a professional services team that can even, undertake the operations on the customer's behalf if they wish so. So there's a lot more to it than just, good data insights and tooling. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't know how to use it, and if you don't have the experience from the past, it's not working. You got to make those two going hand in hand.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I think that definitely unpacked it for me a little bit. Can I ask you personally, if you have a pledge, maybe you'll see we have asked people to do a hashtag Global Trade Earth Day and make a pledge today. So is there something that you can personally share with us about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. I just relocated from San Francisco to Copenhagen 2 weeks ago, and I'm already getting sort of onboarded in how the garbage system works here at home. It's very different from when I left Copenhagen. So I'm actually been very pleased to see how organized it is and how you can actually help do better for the planet by putting the right garbage in the right boxes. So I'm gonna try to nail that the coming weeks as I get up and running. And then secondly, I'm so far commuting to work on my bike. It's 15 kilometers each way. It's kind of nice here in the spring. Let's see when winter comes. But I have an ambition to try and do that every day, because I think it's good for me and it's good for the planet.
No, it is. Biking, zero emissions. I also have an electric car that I've had for 5 years, and we just bought a second car, which is also electric. So I don't think I will ever personally, hopefully, have a car that uses gas anymore. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. And thanks to everyone who stayed with us today on this Earth Day marathon. Stay tuned for the next segment. And I'm just so glad to have you on board at ZeroNorth and look forward to doing great things together.
Bye. Thanks for having me, Lora.
Thank you. Thanks.
The world is in a climate crisis, and all industries must do their part to reach zero emissions. Maritime trade is critical to today's society, but is also responsible for 2.8% of all greenhouse gases. A future where global trade reaches zero is possible, but how do we actually get there? I'm Lora Jakobsen, ZeroNorth's Chief Purpose Activist and an expert in sustainable shipping. In Navigating Zero, I'm sitting down with thought leaders to explore the inner workings of global trade, its massive impact on our society, and the obstacles it faces navigating its way to zero. Shipping continues to struggle with its data-driven digital transformation. Perhaps due to it being a global industry with different regional capabilities, needs, mindsets, and conflicting incentives with siloed departments. These complexities could be some of the reasons why this industry has also been slow to adopt technology and reap the benefits of machine learning and AI. My guest today is Danny Lange, Vice President of Business Intelligence and Artificial Intelligence at Google. Danny has an impressive resume. He's worked at Microsoft, Uber, Amazon, Unity, and General Motors. He's been leading some of the most exciting innovations in AI and machine learning over the last 30 years. Danny has been at the forefront of groundbreaking initiatives such as speech recognition, large-scale machine learning, and recently, the enablement of generative AI. Danny has been a board member of ZeroNorth since its inception and is incredibly passionate about leveraging his expertise to help shipping reach zero. Danny has worked at a lot of digital-first companies and recognizes that shipping is siloed and traditional in many of its practices. Data science is used in modern shipping, but machine learning requires an extreme amount of data to train its models. More data than perhaps exists today, or that is cleaned, quality checked, and standardized for it to be utilized. So where do we go from here?
It is very difficult to attack challenges like sustainability in a real and true impactful way if you don't have the data. If you don't have data, you act on intuition, perception, ideas, but you're not really acting on facts. And more importantly, without the data, you don't really know if what you're doing has the right impact that you're aiming for. So that's why it's so important to have data to measure and make decisions, and then also have data to measure the impact of what you're doing so that you know that you're doing the right thing.
Danny, I'd like to ask you about synthetic data. Could you explain what it is and how we could possibly use it in shipping?
Absolutely. It sounds really fancy with synthetic data, but we can also think of it in another way, which is it's data that comes from simulation, it's data that comes from gameplay. And for instance, if you look at how vessels, they travel the seas, you can simulate weather, you can simulate currents, and then you can sort of play out different, what we can call war games against nature here and see what is the best route to take. Yeah, these things cannot be computed. It's way too complex. But what you can do is you can simulate and generate synthetic data that you can play up against, and in that way test what you're doing. If you, for instance, are routing a vessel between two ports.
The use cases for synthetic data could be vast in our industry. For example, the traditional Noon report could replace its manual entry with an automatic capture of thousands of data points. When sensors are not available on board, synthetic data could potentially fill in the holes when poor quality data exists. This would enable a vessel's daily snapshot to become useful, real-time, high-frequency data. During Danny's time at Uber, he was part of bringing groundbreaking machine learning algorithms into their services, many services that we are all familiar with as passengers. The premise was simple. A user's phone sends a location ping every 2 seconds. This data can be used to monitor traffic in real time and can even be used to predict time of arrival. It also allows drivers to be matched with the most appropriate passenger and vice versa. When you have all those thousands of data points, you can see the immediate impact of understanding patterns in complex dynamic environments, such as traffic while driving or weather while sailing.
And then you can collect all that data into a larger simulation of what if scenarios. Yeah, what if the weather was different? What if we took a different route? What if we slow down? Or what if we speed up? What are the consequences of that? And then really understand, at the end of the day, that's what we want. You understand, how do we get from A to B in the most sustainable way?
When you were at Uber, you did work on large-scale route optimization models. Is there any learnings from that experience that we can deep dive into? For example, how are the principles of machine learning currently being used, and how could we utilize them in a different way?
The core lesson learned from Uber was that by using vast amounts of data and machine learning, which, a lot of people nowadays call AI, but at that time we just called it machine learning. What Uber was able to do was to go into just any city and very quickly outcompete the local taxi companies. And those companies, they ran on, I would say, organizational memory or knowledge. They ran people-based. They routed taxis to their destination from a dispatcher. I still often get into a taxi in Denmark and I say I would like to go to this address, and they say, okay, left or right. Yeah. In some cases, they don't even use any GPS or map devices or gadgets. And that was really a game changer. At the very, very basic level, it was this ability to use real-time data from the vehicles to optimize the pickup and drop-off experience. Yeah. And if you look at that, it's the same thing that companies like Amazon is doing when they bring you your products. And a lot of other companies are learning from that same experience.
If we take a look at the learnings from that and we look at a vessel and the master and the shore and how these connect with each other, are we actually going to be able to utilize those learnings that you've taken and implement them in a way that is going to fast forward the digitalization and the uptake of technologies?
Let's keep the comparison with Uber here, because Uber was sort of presenting a new way for customers to hail a taxi. Yeah. And it was driven by two things. Number one was the smartphone. You would have a phone that would reveal your location when you order a vehicle. But I think it's also very important to understand that that was one of the first breakthroughs. The shipping industry as a whole is much, much more complicated than Uber. That's a fact. And therefore, we're going to need to use much more technology. It's going to probably take a little longer time to really, I'm scared to use the word disrupt the shipping industry, but at least improve it dramatically. Because, as you point out, there are so many actors and so many very, very complicated factors in play. We should look at that as an opportunity.
I think disruption is about a different way of thinking, because I come from the tech industry. But maybe for shipping, we should use another word. Not because we don't want people to feel uncomfortable, but in order to activate change, we need to get everyone on board. This word should represent leading the way forward, as it is a shift in mindset that the industry needs to reach zero. But it is also a journey. So I like the word transition because it represents action and progress. Like in many industries, it's business as usual that prevents us from transforming. So whether we say disruption or transition, it's clear that the status quo is no longer a viable solution. We must think differently. When Danny worked at Unity, a cross-platform video game engine, he used machine learning and AI to help game developers using the platform to rethink their monetization methods. This change helped move developers from the traditional to the optimized.
When I joined Unity, a lot of the monetization in video games was really based on a purely artistic element. Like, you create video games and some of them become hits and you make money, and most of them, they don't become good hits and you don't make money. And most of that was attributed to sort of the art and quality of a game, and probably also a lot of randomness. Yeah. And what we did at Unity was to basically put a big dose of machine learning and AI into that. Not to remove the art, it's still there, but to put more science into how the game reach its audience. What we did was to build up a huge amount of data that we gathered from people playing a lot of games and a lot of games being published. And the key point here is to allow advertisements in games, mobile advertisement in games, and let a game run as far as it can before you sort of hand off the players to the next game. If you hand them off too early, you don't sort of make enough money on the first game. If you wait too long, they leave and they stop playing your game and they just go away. And we really learned to optimize that. And if you think about shipping, it's this complex relationship between a lot of people, and really understand what they're going to do next in the near future, whether they're going to stay with you or they're going to go to a competitor. If you can predict that really well, you can keep your customer longer. And that is essentially what we have been doing in the game industry. We have really optimized the monetization of each game, which has helped the whole industry. It's actually democratized the industry. There are over 600-700 games released every day on the Unity platform. Yeah, there are over 1 million developers, over 4 billion unique monthly players playing a game on that platform. It's just really been growing to these very large numbers because of that optimization. And it's a very complex environment, and I think we can learn a lot from it when we start looking at shipping and actually the whole supply chain challenge.
It's interesting to take learnings from something like gaming and apply them to shipping. They may not seem to have anything in common, but understanding how users are engaging with the Unity platform could teach us plenty about our industry. Maybe we need to move beyond focusing on just outcomes and turn our attention to continual optimization of platforms and processes. The data flywheel effect is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but sometimes isn't widely understood. I'll let Danny give his definition.
The data flywheel is that phenomenon that when we collect data and we use that data to optimize our business, we are induced to collect even more data because we think that more is better, and that has been our experience. In the gaming world, for instance, it's really about understanding when people play games, when they move up through the different levels, what they do, how long they play. The more you sort of dive in, the better you can predict the future. At Uber, we collected a lot of detailed data around the pickup experience. And the more data we collected and the more we used that data, the better the experience became. And it's a flywheel because it amplifies, yeah. I think it's generally understood in the industry today that we really want to get into this mode where we collect more data, use more data, and then we collect even more data to be better at understanding what's going on in our company, what's going on in our systems, yeah.
Where do you think the data flywheel will take us next? Are we missing anything?
What's next is really something that is extremely hot these days, and that is to get insights out of the data. That has been a difficult task. It has been something that data scientists and engineers has been their privilege to be in that space. But what we're seeing these days is a desire to bring the data and insights to every employee in a company, to democratize the data flywheel. We want to make sure that the COO, the CFO, and the whole chain down can, look into the data using natural language, writing questions, not complicated code, but writing questions and say, why is this happening? What is this? What should I look for here? What is the question I'm not asking? That kind of, basically posing that kind of questions to the data that you have collected and to your business.
And so I guess this hot topic you're talking about is generative AI and natural language so that we can ask the questions. So that obviously brings up a lot of concern for people understanding what is AI and is it taking over our world? And I think we talk about it a little bit, old AI, new AI, AI that is prescriptive and has its boundaries, and you ask it a special question that it wants you to solve. So how is that being utilized in businesses today to optimize their business?
It's very limited right now, but as you can imagine, all the big data providers and analytics companies are really hard at work on this particular topic. I really just like to think of it as this is going to be the calculator for the decision maker. Yeah, it's not going to remove any jobs. It's kind of the opposite, yeah. I think that is going to be a very helpful tool. So when I say it, what do I mean? Well, the fact that you can enter a dialogue. We have heard a lot about ChatGPT and Google Bard and other of those conversational tools or chatbots. You're basically going to be able to enter a dialogue with the system, and you're going to be able to ask the system, how is my business doing in this particular area, or what can I do to improve my business here? And you're going to get some response back based on the data that your company has collected. People will be empowered to ask these questions themselves, and the data scientist would actually now be able to work on much more complicated problems that are much more unique and requires much more hand-holding. If you take a step back and look at it, you're just going to see a shift in both focus and capabilities, that the skilled people, the data scientists, the engineers are going to focus on even more important matters, and the rest of us are going to have this democratized access to information.
Many companies use business intelligence or BI systems to analyze data, but being able to create innovative ways to understand that data would open up a whole new world of possibilities. For example, we are seeing generative AI being used to find patterns in thousands of data points, which humans could never detect. Danny's entire career has been built on innovation. Having the creativity to see an existing process and turn it on its head is not something everyone is capable of. But Danny's particular skill is to see these opportunities for change-making a little bit earlier than most people. Sometimes it's not easy being a first mover, which we've seen in the shipping industry as well. The first movers are the ones that take the bold action to affect change, but it also comes with consequences.
And sometimes I see and act a little too early. With speech recognition, for instance, I spent over 8 years on that, and it was slightly on the early side. The recognition accuracy was about 80%, which sounds like a lot, but in fact it means that every fifth word is being misunderstood or misrecognized, which made it really hard. But I think you have to always push the envelope. But now we're seeing nowadays that with the latest large language models, you may be able to take another step up in these voice systems so that you can actually have a very meaningful dialogue with them, not just sort of turn off my light or set the alarm. My whole point here with this is that it has taken a long time. Yeah, we started in 1997 on that. Maybe now I can have a real dialogue with one of these systems. It's taking a long time.
We need to move with urgency when it comes to the climate emergency. The green transition needs to happen now. Luckily, regulations is stepping up to help propel that change with initiatives such as CII and EU ETS. The emission reduction targets for 2030 and 2050 activated the decarbonization conversation, but we need to move beyond talking now. Rapid innovation is a necessity and cannot be an afterthought. If Danny uses his power of foresight to look 5 years into the future, where does he think big data and AI are heading in relation to sustainability?
I think that when we talk about sustainability, there's sort of a human tendency to simplify things a lot. We think that if we recycle this or if we do that, it's going to be really great. What I've found very disappointing and challenging is that sometimes when you dive into what you think is really good, it's really good to nature and society and the world, and then when you dive in, you realize, oh, it's not that simple. Yeah. And that's a pattern I have seen now. Every good thing I think is good, intuitively. When you really dive in, it raises a lot of questions. There's a lot of dependencies and costs and side effects and unintended consequences, etc. Yeah. But this is exactly where AI has its strength. It can really understand these very deep and complex patterns and relationships that we as humans do not understand. It works with probabilities. So I always love to bring this up, that as humans we like to think Newtonian, we like to think that we can compute and predict everything 100%. We love determinism, but nature is constantly much more like Heisenberg, the quantum mechanics scientist who basically said that everything is really a matter of uncertainties. Yeah, it's distributions of probabilities that matter. And When you look at sustainability and you look at the supply chain, if you look at shipping, we really need to make a lot more progress in AI to understand all the consequences that go into what happens before things get on a ship and what happens to things after they get off the vessel. Because it's not just in isolation what we do from port A to port B. It's a much bigger picture that matters. And this is where I think that artificial intelligence is really going to help the shipping industry and humanity in optimizing the entire supply chain to minimize the undesirable impact of it.
And I'm now wondering, what would your advice be to the industry? Where should we put our focus and invest heavily in?
Actually, data collection, I still come back to that because we are still lacking a lot of data in the business. And then we also need to use the technology to optimize the business a lot more. I think that that would be a very important driver. I think that to a certain extent, it's clearly less about who owns the vessels. It's much more about how they're operated. It's much more about how the ports are operated. And really using the technology, the shipping industry should use the technology to take the highest possible view of the entire process. And I think that's where the industry should really focus.
Data is essential for moving the industry forward, not only from a benchmark point of view, but also from a standardization one. My key takeaways from my conversations with Danny are: the data flywheel effect as a concept is foundational to our understanding of what more data can do for our industry. The more data we get, the better outcomes and solutions we can provide. Everyone benefits, especially customers. Data is, of course, anonymized. The benefit is in the breadth of information that propels the knowledge shared with customers. Outputs based on more data points than just your own further empowers your teams to obtain knowledge beyond your fleet. You get access to industry trends and insights from which your organization and your people can make more informed decisions. AI and generative AI are such powerful tools, but what is lacking in the industry is the large amount of high-quality, cleaned, and usable data needed to train these AI models. It just doesn't exist today. High-frequency data or synthetic data could be a solution which enables the step change needed for the creation of enough data to train AI models that will power the next information-based system for our industry. Above all, we need bold leadership to embrace and understand the power of data. Change management is critical for the shift from manual to digital and from feelings to data-based decision-making. If you're going to take anything away from this podcast, remember this: we need to better understand the power of the data flywheel effect. Our industry needs to create enough data in order to train AI models. And role modeling a bold leadership can affect the necessary change management that shifts ways of working. These three things will enable the green transition and help us to face the ever-changing challenges in this exciting and dynamic industry. Thank you so much, Danny, for joining me today. I look forward to following you in your role as Vice President of Business Intelligence and Artificial Intelligence at Google. And thank you for listening to Navigating Zero, Global Trade's powerful wave of change. If this conversation has inspired you, please follow us on your podcast app of choice for more fascinating discussions on how we reach zero. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. You can find a link in the show notes. Bye for now.
Hi, so here we are again with some Green Talk conversations. I'm joined today by Liesel van Schoenberg, who is joining us, and she's from our finance department, financial planning, FPA. What is it?
Financial planning and analysis.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so this is how it works. We have these Green Talk cards, which we have created in the digital suitcase for our customers and partners, that they can have conversations during lunchtime, and it kind of promotes eco-friendly conversations, thoughtful things about what we're going to say. So we're going to pick a card. Yes? Okay, so our card is, how can we inspire others, including friends and family, to embrace eco-conscious behaviors? Okay, so I'll put that there. Let's see. What do you think?
I think it's a super relevant question, and I think it's actually a difficult one to answer, in a sense that we are all aware of this, but we make it super formal and make it almost a business problem, right? That is how the world is looking at it right now. I'm speaking specifically coming from a country, South Africa, which is of course in Africa, where this is almost, it's so low on the agenda when you think about poverty and all of the normal life issues, right? So from my point of view, I think the best way to inspire friends and family is to make it super simple and make it super tangible in your daily life. It needs to be something where we don't think about it. We don't have to plan for it. We don't have to go out of our way to do something. It should be made super simple. And here I'm thinking of, for example, shopping bags, right? It's not super difficult. Make sure that you have an eco-friendly shopping bag in all of the cars, in your handbag. Then we don't need to purchase these plastic bags every time. For example, switching off lights, right? Using less energy. It's actually something that is beneficial for the household as well. So that's the one part. We have to make it super simple. I also think that we need to make it more spoken about. What you are doing with these cards, I think, is great. Talk about it. Get some input, some reflections. Maybe you pick up some cool tip from somebody who's doing something that is super easy and simple to implement yourself.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you're saying that, because I sat down here with Marcho and we talked a little about technology, and he said technology should just be seamless, like you don't even know that you're using it, which is exactly what you said. I mean, for us, we only have electric cars, so there's no choice for anyone else. They have to make that choice. But I also think there's something around feeling like you're doing enough, right? And they talk about how today there's a lot of teenagers, and I actually have teenagers at home, who are worried about our planet. And it's important for us to say, like, what is it that we can do and what we can't do? And even what you're doing is enough, as long as you're doing something, so that you don't have this, this fear of not doing enough.
I think that's a good point, right? And I have actually small kids. They are 7 and 9 years old, and I was actually thinking they are doing such cool stuff at school these days. I mean, they actually have this as a subject on a weekly basis,
really?
Thinking about the earth. How is it that we are? What should we be doing, and what should we be thinking about? My little one is today planting tomatoes in some pots. And she comes home and she actually tells me we're planting tomatoes tomorrow because it's important that we replace whatever we use. And I think for a 7-year-old to use a language like that means that we are doing something some way. And I hope that we are instilling in them, as part of a normal belief and part of just living life, that this is the way that we should be doing it.
Yeah, fantastic. I absolutely love that. But I also think that, some people do talk about how we're depending on the future generations to solve our problems. And I think that is one way, which is why we need to build children's minds to be able to solve complex problems or be problem solvers in the way that they view the world. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything. We all need to act together in order to, navigate our way to zero emissions. So thank you so much, Liesel, for joining me today with our Green Talk, and I hope you enjoy Earth Day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.